another update with our gun bans, our 2024 Firearms Act over here in Western Australia. We've just got to the end of the last of the submissions, or the public submissions from the various groups over to the upper house, the committee from the upper house on the Firearms Act. That was WAPOL. It was the longest, which is curious. Basically Cole Branch and a couple of police officers there to talk about, basically say that they thought the system was all pretty good and going pretty well, and the things you'd expect out of the firearms, or out of the police branch, or the police officers and the commissioner. And I suppose overall, what I'd say with the submissions, the people dealing with the committee side of things, is I think there were some very good things put forward. There was some government supporting government. There was a little bit of organisations sort of supporting each other, a little bit sort of stuff, but really it was largely the people put forward, most of the submissions put forward were thorough, put into a very good lot of effort. Obviously a lot in what their written submissions went into, and they only had sort of opening statements and then asking questions there. But I would say that did a very good job. In particular, one that stood out that said probably a little more about the reality of things would have been Steve Harrison, who did definitely get to say how badly the system was built. I think other people did the same thing more in their written submissions. He managed to do that there. But also we got from the chairman of the hearing committee saying that, okay, we can't deal with any of that. We're not allowed to touch any of that. The review is not about the process or the big fundamentals of the law. It's only really the small bits and pieces they can touch. And I suppose that's thing I'd have to reiterate very thoroughly is, as I've said several times, this is window dressing. It might not be quite the right term, but certainly it's something that was said from a long way back, well, before this was even started, was that they are only going to make some small changes, because that's all is in their preview. But in actual fact, if you think a little past that point, it's even deeper than that if you really think of the tactics that the police force and the government are actually up to. And I suppose I want to go through that more than anything. I want to go through that a little bit and also tell us the way forward a little bit as to what we can actually do. I don't want to undermine what the good things that were said there. It is on public record, both in and I put a link down below so you can see all those if you want to. Some are pretty tedious. It takes a fair bit of time to go through and watch them all, but there's a lot of good information there. And obviously we should be able to get hold of their written submissions in some form or other, and you can see what was said. So it's all sort of on public record of what they said. But I suppose the end of the day, let's go through the tactics that are in play here. So understand this. This is not something to sit back and say it's all okay. And I suppose that's one of the things I want to try and stop from happening. I'm hearing people writing on online, that sort of stuff, is that some people are getting a pretty easy path. It's pretty easy to get onto here, and we're distracted by the semantics of what the system is to get onto, and ignoring the monstrous overreaches, the control of the executive branch, the lack of separation of powers. They're ignoring some fundamental, huge democratic errors that are here of this really terrible thing that's been put forward, and people are sort of just down to their own little thing. Oh, it wasn't too hard for me, so it's all good. I'm licensed and I'll be fine. It's a very scary situation to get into, because it's a super. Listen, there's a lot coming. I'll explain a little bit more. I will explain a little bit more in a little bit. But to start with, let's think about the tactics of how you do this. If you wanted to bring in some really overreaching, overbearing rules, how would you do it? And I need you to understand also, this has been planned from a long way back. I know as long as 5 years ago, there were conversations about what the police department wanted to do, how they wanted to remove firearms, every single fashion they could. Some members of the police department, particularly involved with the firearms side of things, how they wanted to remove all the firearms. And that's not a new conversation, particularly for West Australian Police, or from that hierarchy of that West Australian Police Force. But what you would do is manage to get it forced through government, which we got that done. Mr. Apali and team managed to force it through. A fair few rules that they sort of changed or bent to get through there, get it in there. Then go through the blow of actually making that happen. With they use it obviously as propaganda to get in there with guns are bad, that we've had lots of negative propaganda over the years. Guns are bad, so we'll use it as a way to get in, but it has this ulterior motive of more than that. And then deal with the flack for a little while, and then offer a few little things. A few months in, offer a few little positives. But here's a really key ingredient when you think about what the review can do. It's been put forward as a win, we got a review. But in actual fact, when I think a little bit deeper, and this is just my thoughts on the subject, and I suppose the more I put it together and discuss it with people, it lines up and makes sense, is the review gives hope that we're being listened to and we're going to get some changes that matter. Now, given the fact that there's little going to change, that maybe there'll be little positives out of it, but it gives hope that it'll be a lot better. So what that does is make people go quiet. Well, we've got this review happening, so we won't worry about anything else and we'll go quiet. So that's the first step. The next step is you would drag it out. It is a massive bill, massive act, massive set of regulations, massive thing that's here. So it's going to be a lot of work to do there. Lots of submissions, and then we have the public submissions and these meetings we're having. So that stuff there is going to be dragged out again. But what you're actually doing in the process, as much as very, very understood why the committee would like to extend it so they get more time to do this, you have to go with the fact of they're not making the decisions. They're just making suggestions. Regardless of where they get to, they're just making suggestions for the upper house to look at. We still have Labor in control, and they're going to do exactly what they're told to do. And we have the Greens that maybe we can move them. That's still a place we have to, if we move them, maybe we've got some power there. But otherwise we don't have any power. And Labor have done this deliberately. They're behind this the whole time. They don't really care. They want to appear to have done the right thing. So if you drag it out with another extension, I suspect there'll be another 1 or 2 extensions, so another 2 to 4 months at least. On top of what they're extended to, what you've actually done is taken the people who should be getting noisy and made them quiet because they think something's good coming. But there's another little trick to this. In a year's time, or in 2 years' time, they can look back at it and say, well, when you're saying these weren't democratically constructed laws and we broke any rules and what they did and the separation of powers and all those things, no, we did a full committee, upper house committee review. We had all the relevant players at the board. We listened to their at the table. We listened to them all. We put it to the upper house to make a decision. So we made a decision with all the best interests involved. Now, they don't need to get into the semantics. They can make that statement. They haven't lied. So was this review a planned part of this process? So in the end of the day, they can say that we did all the right things. Sort of would make sense out of everything else, and they certainly have not been above board or transparent about what they're up to at all. It certainly would make sense, like this was maybe always part of the plan. So beyond that point, I can get into one of the things that did come up with the competition side of things and the sporting shooter side of things, talking about which it re-raised the problem and made me aware, even more so I suppose I sort of was, but made me even more aware of one of the actual plans that's in place here. The plans which a lot of people are thinking, okay, I've got my firearms license, so it's fine. I even heard someone, I think that was Paul Fitzgerald from the SSAA or Alliance, whichever hat he's wearing, saying that these regulations, it'll be for the next 50 years, which is a farcical thing to say from when I look at what they're up to. There's not any firearms here at 50 years with this strategy at all. Short of maybe in a couple of precious hands or in one club or something like that. What they have in place is not just that they're in very shortly. Once they keep it quiet enough and keep it tracking along and get people happy about getting onto the system, then all these overreaching rules in so many different fashions, which we all know if you've read them in various forms, whether it's simply crossing a border with a firearm and a $5,000 fine, whether it's not having your ammunition locked up properly in a separate case and you fire because you're just driving down the road, just crossing from one property to the other, and that's an infringement. So we'll take those firearms to the fit and proper person, to your opinion, which I think is section 150 or section 368, whichever one it is, that the commissioner doesn't like your opinion because you don't agree with the government, think they're not doing the right thing. We can take your firearms, take your firearms, take your firearms. They will start to prosecute that stuff. That's what this is in place for. That will happen after they've got to that. It's not going to happen now. Don't do it now because you'll stir them up. So leave it till afterwards. But a big part of the strategy is the entry path into firearms. Is that both, be it a junior, they mentioned at the committee hearing, they mentioned that a junior that's doing very well, might be a state champion. In West Australia can't even get a place where they can't shoot out of this state. We don't have any permit. We don't have any way to do that. They haven't bothered with that. But they also mentioned that the parent might be the family decide they're going to get into the firearms, so the parent gets a license, does this, goes through, learns everything, that sort of stuff. No, they've got to have been doing it for 5 years before they're able to take their own parent on. Like for some reason or other, 5 years down the track, you're going to know more about safety than when you've learned all the safety and you've been passed as proficient and done everything perfectly. It doesn't matter, 5 years. It's got nothing to do with making you more proficient. It's got it making it too hard to do. It's simply raising the jump, making it so you can't get in there, raising the boundaries, making it too hard to get in. The normal way, when you stop and look at our laws, you want to go to someone's place and shoot, you can get pulled up simply because you haven't texted them and asked them first. Even though they're standing with you, there's no written document prior to the date where you're shooting. You've once again broken the law because of what they put in place. What we've said about how a property owner has to do the right bits and pieces before they can have anything fired on their property. That's plinking, whatever. They have to do all these other bits and pieces. We have the normal traditional way that most of us learned how to shoot, which would be go out as kids onto a farm doing something else on the farm. The farmer says, do you want to all have a little shot with this? And we'll have a very organised, very safe little shot with the 22 or with whatever that firearm is and get a feel for what that is. And that might be just something you did once and didn't do it again. It might be something in the beginning of, wait a minute, I'd like to do more of this. Well now, no, that's not legal. And we even talk to the point where that's for an adult, it's not legal, for a child it's not legal, but we've even got to points in the review where it's snuck in there where maybe we'll raise the minimum age to 18. 18 years old before you can touch a firearm. Got to do with safety in basic supervised provision. It's got nothing to do with safety whatsoever. What it's got to do with is make sure the kids are indoctrinated into firearms are bad, make sure they've gone through the system, the school system, make firearms are bad. It is to create removal of firearms, not just by taking them off the people who have them, but also making it too hard for people to get into them. Whether it's the process or the cost, which is now phenomenal of what it takes to get into that. This is all about disarming the population. And I need people to wake up to that. I'm fine, or I'm just doing this, I'll be fine. The end of the day is the why. If you can get to the point of understanding and seeing between the reeds and see, or to see the trees amongst the wood, or the wood amongst the trees, is if you can see that, then why they're doing this, what else is going on. We all that are thinking know that this is a big issue. As for what that why is, I don't know. I dread to think. But if they can do it here, then look at where our fisheries and firearms and any fauna freedoms we thought we might have had, where they go. If you put the why they're doing this with firearms in and the how they're doing it with firearms, this is the time to stand up and push back. This is very much the time to say, okay, no. So I can go a lot more on about that, but let's go into the how. I've said get together, talk with each other, come up with ideas, come up with ways to do things. The simple things that we should be on, the targets we've got. The disallowance, it can be run again, and it is possible. I've been through several processes now, but going through the actual proper process. It's not quite as simple as it automatically happens. The government have to do things. So if the government do nothing, Well, see, that's not what they're employed for. They have to once they get in this process. But if they did nothing, yes, you'd end up with a vacuum or a nuclear situation or a lawless situation. So there is a logic to that, but only if they don't do their job, and only if they do, or they do their job badly. So doing it properly, then a disallowance is a very possible thing. Disallow the regulations, it ends up cancelling, making the act dysfunctional. It turns into where the previous act and the previous regulations are revived and can get reinstalled. We would not be doing that. The sensible process in my mind would not be doing that just to go back and just ignore everything that's done. The sensible process would be to do that with the aim of building a proper new set of regulations with all interested parties at the table. Not one group from here that agrees with that group from there that's working with that group from there and the rest of us are left out. No, with all the groups at the table. And the likes of the smaller percentage of the groups that are the smaller number of people should have a smaller group at the table. So we should have more weight to it. That was one thing that Steve Harrison mentioned in his submission, is a percentage-based thing, worked out in the numbers of shooting to get this a little more even, get it to make some more sense, get it so it suits the demographic of what we've actually got out there. But build proper things. And in that, it's not just stepping to where it's more control on firearms, maybe it's a little more logical control on firearms. So the likes of suppressors, something that would help aid the shooting side of things, make the firearms less a negative, more constructive, safer to use. We should be talking about it. Conversations on whether this whole self-defense thing is not allowed whatsoever in any shape, form, fashion in a country that's getting more and more violent. Not to do with firearms. We're getting our firearms taken off us. The violence is happening elsewhere. It's part of our culture. It's part of, or what our culture is being turned into. So these are conversations that should be had, not hidden under the bench because the propaganda has pushed them there, but brought out in the open. Conversations should be had amongst our community to find our way forward. So with that in mind, go back to the 73 Act, 74 regulations, and then give a realistic time frame, whether that's 2 years or 5 years, to build new stuff to actually go forward into the future with all interests concerned, not just the few that particularly want the firearms to disappear, as it would seem. The next bit I'd like to say, or with that, that's only going to happen, the disallowance side of things is only going to happen if we can move the Greens. So the focus needs to be on getting the message to the Greens, or more to the point, to the Greens base. The replies that came from Brad, the head of the Greens office, saying that it's not legal to do, you'd end up with their nuclear situation, as he mentioned to everyone, people who got that reply. Well, that can be replied back to in whatever form that no, that's not the case. And maybe that's even, here's the full legal process of how it should be done. So you can't hide under that rock. That rock's been lifted off and now you're going to have to stand in full exposure. Will you hold the government to account? Our native wildlife is counting on you, and the democracy of Western Australia is counting on you. Now, as to whether they will or won't, that is something to put pressure on their base, to put pressure on them. Us yelling at them, we can point out that they're wrong in what they've said legally, but their base is the one that needs to move that. So that's something we can focus on. Beyond that point, putting pressure on the government, whether that's protests, whether that's stop work, whatever that is for the people to come together with and figure out a way forward. But it also is to come together with other groups. It's not just firearms owners. Why are they doing this? What's actually going on? It really, really matters, and it really, really needs more people on board. The world is waking up. WA is starting to wake up. Let's push heavier into that. That's what the conversations and things are about. The next bit to really consider is what I've been banging on about for a fair while. We've stopped it while we're going through this process, but it's positive advertising. Let's get into a way to do that. Let's get into a way to get into the mainstream, whether that's advertising on YouTube, which is obviously a financial thing, but advertising YouTube, Facebook, but particularly mainstream, where the sheeple watch and get their information. Let's work out a way to do that. I think the SSAA is probably the key ingredient to do this. I've asked before, I've tried to get through with clubs, I've tried to get it in there, it's sort of discussed, but it's never got anywhere. But this is a group that has a lot of the members' money, It also could raise more the moment they start to do that sort of stuff. I've not spoken to a member that wouldn't be interested in putting in, whether it's another $50, $100, $150 to put into, whatever that is, proportionate amount to put into for advertising. Spend millions of dollars on advertising. Find a way to do this. Put forward the positives of our sport. We're not selling firearms, we're not selling ammunition. No, selling the sport, selling the activity. I shouldn't say sport. It's not just the sport. Yes, it is a sport to a certain degree, but if you want to show or stand up for firearms in Australia, then it's about the activity of it in all different forms. Put forward the good people, the diversity, the safety, the wonderfulness of our sport, if you actually get it. The discipline you come from, all the positive things. Work out smart ways to put this forward. I feel that yes, there is in small groups can raise this sort of stuff, but as for the group, which is largely the Sporting Shooters Association of Australia, are the mob that are really in the position to be able to do that. In my mind, the responsibility to do that. Let's not just run their own little bits and pieces on your own channel. We're just the choir watch, but no, to get stuff in front of other people. The positive aspect to our sport. Now, this should also be something that, in my mind, should be funded by the big importers. So the NIA, the OSA, the big importers, the people who are bringing stuff in, who are making money from this industry, then a little bit of putting back in that place there, with a little bit, okay, there might be some, I don't know what the sacrifices are, but this matters. These are the people that are who you are standing for in one form or other, or making money from in one form or other. This is something that really matters. That's another place where we can really focus. I get there's this negative, particularly the WSAA, on the protests and marches and things that want to happen for some reason or other, trying to be more buddies with the police officers. We're not going against the police officers. We're going against what the government's decisions are. It's time we started to work together. So the last bit I'd say on all the doubting Nellies, the people who want to say, oh no, it's not as bad as you say it is. I suppose it has been so obviously laws that are about a lot bigger things than some of our groups and some of the people want to own up to or want to actually admit to. I've tried to find various ways to put it forward. What I've recently thought of was, wait a minute, why don't I ask the most arbitrary way I can ask the question and get information from that and see what that actually has to say. So I asked ChatGTP to look at our West Australian new regulations, or the bill, the 2024 bill, look at the process through a democratic freedom, the morals of what we think our society is, to look at that through to the bill as to what was actually written. I gave it some specific things to look at, whether it was property rights, whether it was well, I think it was the 150, so about speech and about your thoughts, to look at about a few bits and pieces attached to that side of things, the health assessments particularly on the older side of our world, the getting in with the people getting into the sport, and to look at it through the perspective of how it sits in democratic norms, and maybe to give an option or to give its opinion on what it thought these laws were all about. What was the objective of these laws? This is what it had to say.
The Western Australian Firearms Act 2024 and accompanying Regulations 2024 represent the most significant shift in firearms regulation in state history. While presented as modernization for public safety, the framework contains provisions that extend far beyond safety objectives. The cumulative effect is the erosion of property rights, civil liberties, and long-standing cultural practices. This briefing identifies the key negatives, benchmarks them against democratic norms, and assesses the likely strategic intent behind the legislation. Some negatives of the Firearms Act 2024: erosion of rights and freedoms, age-based discrimination, mandatory health checks for older shooters, without evidence of disproportionate risks. Section 150, license may be denied or revoked based on the Commissioner's opinion of an applicant's views, beliefs, or associations. Loss of right to silence. Section 368. License holders compelled to answer questions, overriding the long-standing common law privilege against self-incrimination. Despite government commitments to protect property rights. 2. Weakening of legal and democratic safeguards. Successive Henry VIII clauses over 100 instances, allowing the executive to amend or override legislation without parliamentary scrutiny, subjective discretion, rely on personal judgment rather than objective, evidence-based standards. Lack of evidence-based sweeping reforms imposed despite licensed firearm misuse being statistically rare in Western Australia. Lack of reasonable compensation, restrictions on property use and rights imposed, without compensation mechanisms. Point 3. Personal and practical burdens, high entry barriers. Prospective shooters must be prepared to invest heavily in club membership, storage, and licensing, if considering entering the sport. Loss of rural pathways. Traditional supervised use of firearms on private land is now prohibited, severing a generational pathway into the sport. Financial exclusion. Lower income and regional residents face disproportionate hurdles. Cultural alienation. Older shooters in rural communities feel specifically targeted and mistrusted. Point 4. Privacy and trust concerns, state intrusion into homes. Inspections of private property for compliance with storage standards. Racines holders treated as suspects. The regulatory design assumes risk and distrust, undermine confidence in government. What a trusting democratic government should provide. In a liberal democracy, regulations should be proportionate to demonstrated risks, be transparent in purpose and scope, respect fundamental rights, privacy, opinion, property, silence. Treat citizens as trusted partners, not adversaries. The Firearms Act. Likely strategic intent behind the legislation. These laws were not drafted by accident or ignorance. They reflected deliberate policy trajectory, civil disarmament by attrition, by raising costs, removing pathways to entry, and imposing ongoing hurdles. The act ensures participation declines over time. Each generation will find firearms ownership less accessible. Centralization of control by banning private supervised use. All legal exposure to firearms is funneled into state-licensed ranges and permits. The state monopolizes access and removes community autonomy. Precedent for executive power. Henry VIII clauses, removal of silence rights, and subjective opinion powers test how far executive authority can extend if normalized here. Similar tools may spread to other policy areas. Political signaling. Firearms regulation is used as a populist safety measure, despite little evidence of misuse by licensed owners. It allows government to appear tough on crime while targeting a politically safe minority. The union with international disarmament trends. The structure aligns with elements of UN small arms frameworks and international pushes to reduce civilian firearm ownership. Western Australia position in Australia. Conclusion. The WA Firearms Act 2024 is framed as safety legislation, but operates as a strategic framework to diminish civilian firearm ownership and consolidate state power. It removes traditional rights, undermines democratic safeguards, and alienates rural and sporting communities. In short, it is not transparent in intent. It does not respect rights expected in modern Western democracies. A trusting democratic government should regulate responsibly while respecting liberty. Instead, this legislation reflects a deliberate strategy of attrition and control, setting a dangerous precedent for rights beyond firearms.
So that's what it had to say. Now, I haven't tried to lead it in any direction. I haven't probably given it as much to the specific information to look into. It's a supercomputer, it's reading everything, putting it together, making sense. And I probably could try and lead a bit more and make it a little more negative or a little more positive. But I haven't tried to do that. That's pretty much as the basics with the guide of a few bits and pieces to say, look at these details here. There are literally hundreds more that are majorly overreaching through the process of being fined for moving a firearm over a border and back again. Really a setup where really making firearms just too scary to think about if you're coming near Western Australia. There's so many other things we could talk about amongst there. We've sort of spoken about it in general, but there keeps on being another rock turned over and wait a minute, you interpret it this way and holy moly, what's going on here? The likes of Cole Blanche, the commissioner, saying that it was all pretty good, that there was all the checks and balances that he doesn't actually have to listen to. His decision is final in most of these situations, but there's these checks and balances, which I don't know what he's actually talking about there in any real sense for the individual rather than the government oversight side of it. So anyway, that's my thoughts. That there is things to do, there is conversation to get on with. We can do things. It is really important. Leave all your comments, your thoughts below. If you've got groups that are getting together, they're starting to get together ideas or wanting to be able to help in real places, not just offering more for me to do or more for someone else to do, something you can do, please let me know. Put it down there, let it in. Other suggestions for sure are welcome. Listen, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for checking in. We'll catch you next time.